In nomine Patris et Filii Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Sub tuum praesidi veni Sancte Spiritus replete vorum cora fidei tui moris signum accende emite spiritum tuum accreabuntur oremus Deus cora fidelium Sancti Spiritus illustratione docovisti da nobis in iodem spiritu recta sapere et eius semper consolatione gaudere per Christum Dominum nostrum. Amen. Nomine Patris et Filii Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Oh. All right. What is that? So 11 to 20. 19. 16. 20. 14. 13. Any three. And I'll put them on the board for you. I have them here. There it is. All right, so I'll do it by order. So there's 13. Okay, so 13 is explain the notion of mystery. That's easy. And the next one is 14, which is what are mysteries taken in the strict sense? Next is, what is it? 14, 16 would be explain the immutability of dogma and its progressive understanding. Boy, that's an important one tonight. Leo said, well, we can't change doctrine until attitudes change. All right. And what is next one is 19. Explain the difference between supernatural chord substantium and supernatural chord modum. Oh my gosh, is that easy? And then 20. Up. Define order. Like a gift. So nothing there, it's too bad.
we're done. Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
All right, we're on page 385. So, this is the First Vatican Council. The latter text states, if anyone says that man cannot be called by God to a knowledge and perfection that surpasses the natural, but that he can and must by himself, through constant progress, finally arrive at the possession of all that is true and good, let him be anathema. So that's condemned. This doctrine presupposes what is said in the first proposition of the syllabus of errors, namely, God actually becomes himself in man and in the world. This is against the descending pantheism. In other words, that God becomes the world. And all things are God and have the very substance of God, as the pantheists say, especially Spinoza, Schelling, Fichte, Hegel, and Haeckel, as well as the modern thinkers. These systems deny the existence of supernatural being and truth, as well as the possibility of miracles, because they reject the existence of God, the free creator, who is really and essentially distinct from the world. They say that the first cause is immanent within the world, you see, and evolution, therefore, becomes the absolute law. You see, everything evolves, including dogma. Hence, the doctrine is also called immanentism. However, thus done, and Pius X talks about that in Pascendi, however, having thus done away with the existence of a transcendent God existing above the world, they still find it necessary to provide an explanation for religious phenomena experienced in man's natural life. Hence, all religions, even the Christian religion, are explained through the evolution of our natural religious sentiment. This is pure modernism. It's all Pascendi. And the value of this sentiment, as well as its evolution, is judged by reason, which remains the supreme arbiter of truth and falsity, good and evil, and utterly autonomous according to the very principle at the root of rationalism. The evolutionistic and pantheistic systems of rationalism are subdivided inasmuch as they take on two forms, empiricist and idealistic. Empiricist or materialistic evolutionism is defended by people like Haeckel, Darwin. That's, all nature is constantly evolving. See, idealistic evolutionism was proposed by Fichte and Hegel. So you'll take that course, which you will regret probably next year. The third level of modern errors. Is horrible because you have to memorize all these people, but you have to know them. However, systems of the second kind, namely deny the possibility of supernatural revelation from the perspective of the subject, can be reduced to agnosticism, which was condemned in particular in Pius X's encyclical Pascendi. So that's okay. You look at number 3, deism in thinkers like Voltaire, Victor Cousin, and Jules Simon. This is at the bottom of 386. By contrast, denied the possibility of revelation from the perspective of God as an agent, inasmuch as this position held that God cannot act outside of the laws of nature. Thus, Robespierre, as a deist, wished to institute a cult of the supreme being and rejected everything supernatural. We talked about that. All right, so moving on to chapter 8. Examination of pantheistic evolutionism, inasmuch as it denies the possibility of supernatural revelation from the perspective of the object. We'll see all this. The thesis of this chapter can be stated: pantheistic evolutionism, denying the possibility of supernatural revelation from the perspective of the object, must deny the first principles of reason. So that means it's absurd. Article 1, an exposition of pantheistic evolutionism in general, followed by a consideration of its empiricist and idealistic forms in particular, regarding how this doctrine denies the order of the supernatural truth. Article 2, a critique of both forms of pantheistic evolutionism. In either form, it would deny the first principles of reason. Okay, so I'll turn the page then. What is pantheistic evolutionism in general? It is the doctrine holding that the principle of all things does not exist from itself and from eternity, meaning God, constituted it in its full perfection as something really and essentially distinct from the world, that's God, but rather is always in the midst of becoming and is nothing other than this fundamental becoming itself, which by its self-determining constitutes the universe, such that things themselves are merely various moments in this universal flux. See, so everything is in constant flux. Nothing remains static. See, it's all just constantly moving. All right? God is self-creative evolution. This is Hegel. So the world is God and it's constantly evolving. I know it's sick, but that's what they say. And this was condemned by Pius IX's Syllabus of Errors. If you look at the second one, if anyone says that finite beings, the corporeal as well as the spiritual, or at least the spiritual ones, have emanated from the divine substance, or that the divine essence becomes all things by self-manifestation or self-evolution, or lastly, that God is the universal and indefinite being, which through self-determination constitutes the universality of beings, differentiated into genera, species, and individuals, let him be anathema. This is all against the pantheists of the 19th century. So there are two parts to absolute evolutionism that must be distinguished from each other, namely a negative part and a positive one. Its negative part is the denial of the existence of the true God, the Creator. Indeed, it denies the necessity for the intervention of a creative cause in the production of matter, vegetative life, sense life, and the intellectual soul. Big Bang. That's part of this. Obviously, as I said, who provides all of the fuel and who lights the match? It's totally absurd. It's all based on the idea that something can come from nothing. And that is more absurd than any of the ancient gods and goddesses that all of those peoples cooked up. You know, the worship of bulls by the Egyptians makes more sense than that. All right. So this is a modern mythology, but everybody believes it. I mean, you know, the modern world is, oh yeah, we all evolved. We were once gorillas, and you see all of that thing where, you know, those diagrams where people are walking around on all fours and then they eventually stand up. Because something cannot come from nothing. You can't get a higher form of life from a lower form of life without a sufficient cause. And the only way that you can have a sufficient cause is by God. Because that's a form of creation, to raise something to a higher level of being. But you need more being. And you're not going to get more being except from subsistent being. All right? I mean, it's really very simple, but we have to learn all this junk because they said it. All beings and phenomena, that means appearances, would come forth naturally in accord with evolution of the first principle immanent in the world. This is pantheistic immanentism. See, this does a beautiful job of getting rid of God. See, if you get rid of God the Creator, you get rid of God and then you get rid of religion. And it was very effective in doing so. And I think that was their motive, because it's so absurd that no one could really believe this. Hence, it denies the existence of a supernatural order of truth and life which is founded on God. And see, that's very much the Novus Ordo. No supernatural order. Indeed, it already can claim for our natural reason what Catholic theology says about supernatural grace, namely that it is a formal participation in the divine nature. Nay, absolute evolutionism ultimately identifies our reason with the divine reason. This leads to the doctrine that was condemned in the First Vatican Council. If anyone says that man cannot be called by God to a knowledge and perfection that surpasses the natural, but that he can and must by himself, through constant progress, finally arrive at the possession of all that is true and good, let him be anathema. We've seen that already. 3, the denial of the possibility of miracles then follows, for miracles arise from the free intervention of God, who is essentially distinct from the world. Now, according to pantheistic evolutionism, God is neither really nor essentially distinct from the world, and likewise cannot act freely within it. So he's subject to physical laws. This pantheistic evolutionistic God. So he can't act outside of the physical laws. With regard to religious philosophy, the positive part of absolute evolutionism is an explanation of the various phenomena of religion through the evolution of our religious sentiment. See, this is evolution of dogma, which we just had the other day from Leo. I don't foresee changing the doctrine of the church. In my tenure, or we can't change the doctrine until the attitudes change. Yes, I mean, it's blatant heresy. And so he's ready to change the doctrines. I'm going to write about it in my newsletter, my October newsletter. Did the other one come back yesterday? Did anyone see it? September is late. Anyway, so we have this religious sentiment, which is all part of this evolution going on, you see. Thus, it affirms that dogmas came into existence without any revelation, properly so called, but just these interior inspirations that people have from their religious experience. That's where it comes from. Likewise, holding that the Catholic Church was not divinely instituted, obviously, if it all comes from religious experience. Hence, her dogmas are always changeable. Truth is no more immutable than man himself, since it evolved with him, in him, and through him. That is Pius X, that's condemned in Lamentabili. Pius X first issued Lamentabili, and then the encyclical against modernism. So, Lamentabili is a whole series. It's like the syllabus of errors, a whole series of condemned propositions. So defined, absolute evolutionism essentially differs from moderate evolutionism, which admits at least that God, the Creator, intervened in the world to produce matter, vegetative life, sense life, and the intellect of soul, and the infusion of grace. Moderate evolutionism holds only that the species of plants or animals which now exist are not ontological species with indivisible and immutable specific differences, but are only empirical classes under which there are certain true yet few species of living things from which they arise through successive transformations, somewhat like the various kinds of dogs come from the dog species. So, in other words, that there could be there's not a change of species as such, but accidental changes within the same species that would make certain changes. For example, in other words, that if God planted in some sort of bug or a bird or something like that, the ability to adapt to a certain environment, say like polar bears or white, you see, that does not offend anything in creation. You see that, but that would be something that God implanted. In other words, an ability to adapt. So you see people with different skin colors, usually according to how much sunlight they are getting, and people in northern climes tend to be whiter than people in southern climes, and so that could happen over a long period of time by some sort of process that is built in to react to various situations. That's also called microevolution. That's what that is. But it really is not. It is not going from a lower species to a higher species. It's simply accidental changes within the same species. And you see what science does is that if it sees, a yellow bird and then one that looks just like it and it's brown, well, they call that two different species. And it isn't two different species, according to at least philosophy. It's the same thing. It's just it differs accidentally. So that's another thing to understand what they mean by species. See, like, a dog is a dog, whether it's a Cocker Spaniel or a Labrador. In other words, it's a dog, and the differences are accidental. So we're not talking about that. He says this moderate form of evolutionism has not been condemned by the church. However, this treatise is not not the place to discuss it. But I would say that has a probability. It seems to be true, but it doesn't offend creation or anything like that. Materialistic or empiricist evolutionism. This doctrine, which is often called monism, affirms that the principle of all things is matter itself, which already contains the rudiments of life and of consciousness. This is a very common idea today. Thus, all the phenomena of vegetative, sense, and intellective life mechanistically came forth from matter. Therefore, in this system, reason is a superior form of experience and of the whole of evolution. Nothing lies above it. Therefore, positive reason, constituting the positive sciences, is absolutely autonomous, the sole arbiter of truth and goodness. So even our intellective abilities came from matter. You see, we just evolved into something that can know the difference between justice and injustice, etc. Materialistic and vel means that's where there's opposition between the two. Hot or cold, that's vel. Or empiricist evolutionism must be distinguished as a general philosophy on the one hand and as a religious philosophy on the other. It must be briefly set forth according to the ordinary form in which it is found in our days, as in the writings of Ernst Haeckel. All right. So they have a footnote there. He was the original evolutionist, and before him Lamarck. Before Darwin. Darwin has just become the most popular, you might say. The general philosophy of this system teaches that there is nothing above the order of the physiochemical phenomena as something essentially distinct from it. Typically, scientists believe this. People in science, like medical doctors and whatnot, not all of them, some of them are quite religious, but that whole world of science would tend to believe that. So, those holding this position intend to prove it both indirectly and directly. Here we will only present their main arguments. Indirectly, otherwise the principle of the conservation of energy would be brought to ruin, a principle that is, they say, the most certain principle in the whole of modern physics and chemistry. And indeed, if vegetative, sense, rational, moral, and religious life were essentially above the order of physical energy, the total quantity of energy would be altered by their influence upon the physiochemical order. This is their argument. Thus, the principle of conservation of energy would be brought to ruin, for that principle holds that physical energy always exists with the same total. In other words, actual and potential, that there's a certain amount of energy and it's just transferred all over the place constantly. The overall sum of energy is constant. Therefore, sense life, intellectual life, and moral life are nothing other than a kind of effect or result of physiochemical phenomena. In other words, they are epiphenomena. So that's not too important. Directly, materialistic, this is their argument from direct reasoning, materialistic evolutionism is also defined from a consideration of the similarities that exist between material and spiritual phenomena. For example, oxygen atoms have an affinity with hydrogen atoms so as to produce together a water molecule. Thus, we already here find ourselves faced with a rudimentary form of inclination. Love and discord govern all the elements, as Empedocles said. This is totally absurd. I mean, it's true that there's inclination in physical things, but to transfer that to what we call love is absolutely absurd. Modern thinkers merely change the words and say attraction and repulsion. This attraction or affinity, according to the overall structure of organisms, leads to the affinities that are found in plants, animals, and men. All the various combinations of atoms are brought about through mechanical forces. However, the psychic element of matter is perfected through mechanical evolution itself. So your intellect is merely the highest product of mechanical evolution. See that? Again, that you can tell the difference between a just act and an unjust act. So it's all just matter that has been highly processed, and that's what they're saying about computers. The only thing a computer can do is what somebody puts into it who has a brain. It can't do anything beyond that. It is a creature of somebody with a brain. And the brain is something that processes all of the material intake. In other words, your senses. It processes all of that, stores it. So you can, if I say the word blue, you know what blue is. It's in your imagination. That's your brain. And you can think blue. It's in your brain imagination. But define blue. Define the smell of a rose. It's totally sensual. You can't define it. See? You might be able to do research and figure out where it comes from, but you can't really define it. It's something that pertains entirely to the sensual order. But you can define love, you can define justice, you can define mercy. Everybody knows what those things are. That's why you have courts of law, to apply justice. It's not too many courts of law in a zoo or in a jungle. So, did you see yesterday some guy that raised a tiger cub from birth practically? The tiger turned on him and ate him. Poor guy. You never know what those cats are going to do. But yeah, that happens once in a while. Those trainers and all. The tiger, the lion, just. There was one in Africa a few days ago too, where he was, on a friendly basis with these animals in some sort of park or something, and they all ganged up on him. I think it was four lions ganged up on him and ate him completely. The only thing left were a few bones. They had a big meal. It was horrible. And he was the one feeding them, doing nice things to them. And they just, in a pack, descended upon him. Anyway, I don't know how we got on that. It's So a religious philosophy is deduced from this general philosophy. Its religious philosophy contains two parts, namely a positive one and a negative one. Its negative part is its denial of a supernatural order of truth, as well as its denial of the possibility of miracles. So that's very much a part of modernism, both of those things. Indeed, this outlook holds that there is nothing above material nature, for it holds that matter is the principle of all things. Likewise, nothing would exist above human reason, because positive reason is the supreme form of all evolution. Finally, miracles are impossible, for they would involve a free intervention of the first cause in the world, which they deny, whereas this outlook holds that the first cause is immanent in the world. Indeed, it is there as something material and unfree, meaning that all phenomena necessarily proceed according to physical determinism. The positive part of the religious philosophy of materialistic evolutionists intends to explain religious phenomena and to respond to the demands made by man's religious sentiment. See, that's a phenomenon. People are religious. According to Haeckel, positive science can already satisfy the speculative needs of our reason, though not yet the exigencies of the heart. However, the practical value of positive science is not inferior to its speculative value, and therefore religion will be gradually set aside with the progress of the sciences. Yet before positive science can satisfy the needs of the human heart through its evolution, it is useful for religions to fulfill this office. That's the 19th century evolutionists' idea, is that science will replace religion and religion will just be put aside. To a great extent, that prediction is true today, to a great extent. Therefore, for this time of transition, positive reason, which is the sole arbiter of truth and goodness, determines what is to be preserved in religion, and especially in the principal religion, Christianity. So going down to the bottom there, practically the following is then necessary. 1, the church must be separated from the state so that the church may be deprived of the aid from the state. 2, lay education must be established, for religion pertains only to education within the family in relation to one's private life, not as a matter falling to social life. All of these things were done in the 19th century. Finally, a course in the history of religions must be established in schools so that so that religious dogmas may be shown to be what they really are, namely mere poetic symbols of moral truths. See, that was a very typical course that you would take in modern universities, history of religions. So it shows all of these people have different religions, so it's just a manifestation of this general religious experience that people have, and it's because they don't understand nature and science, and eventually they will, and all of those things will disappear. You still have your eye problem?
I got it just yesterday. I can see. So
Okay.
it's getting better. I can kind of see.
All right. So. If you look at this description of this whole thing here on page 395, look at number 9 right in the bottom. Or even number 7. The reason to hope for the future, there is a greatly growing number of people who have a very lively sense of injustice who suffer on account of it. The number of those who fight against evil, sickness, poverty, and social injustices is growing. You see, socialism, communism. That's what Leo is talking about all the time. Is the problems in the world, etc. People suffering and social injustices, and it's terrible that Elon Musk should have $1 trillion. What does he care about how much money he has, as long as he made it? You know, that's a terrible thing. So why should he have $1 trillion? Maybe he worked hard. But you see, that's that socialism, that everyone has a right to some money, you know, that they didn't earn. St. Paul says, if you don't work, you don't eat. It's in his epistle. 8, let us respect believers and non-believers. All right. Collaborators in the fraternal city. The peace of minds will be complete on the day when everyone knows that no man and no group of men do not know the entire truth. Let us take courage and in our discussions be courteous and respectful of others' conscience. This was written around 1900. So, 396, and afterwards, when Christianity finally becomes useless, the only thing that will remain will be the positivist religion, that is, the worship of truth, goodness, and beauty, which is nothing other than science, sociology, and art. This is the real Trinity to be substituted for the imaginary Trinity talked about by the theologians. This doctrine has been disseminated by Masons, indeed sometimes with apparent tolerance, urbanity, and modesty, in order to show that the virtues do not depend on religious faith, but that rather religious opinions, just like political ones, are what in fact generate dissensions and quarrels. Even more dangerously, they praise Christianity, which they interpret in a merely natural manner, as though Christ were only a great sage, like Socrates. They abhor the cross and mortification and replace the cross with a star, which is a symbol of deified humanity. Interesting. In this, it is clear how naturalism leads to rationalism, liberalism, humanitarianism, and sensualism, and in relation to society, to socialism. In all places, the kingdom of nature or of humanity is substituted for the kingdom of God. See, so it's very prophetic, all of this. That's the world you're living in, what he just said there in that paragraph. So, all right. Today is September 23rd. Okay. Where is it? 386. What happened to my place? What page were we on?
396.
Oh, okay, 396. Okay. All right, I'm getting there. Halfway through this book. Great. It's only September. Another book, though. This is your second quiz, right? I gave you back the first one.
Yes.
Did we have a quiz in the Ecclesia the other day?
It's tomorrow here.
Tomorrow, okay, yeah, I thought I had some. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti, amen. Sub tuum praesidium confugimus sancta Dei genitrix nostras deprecationes et specias et necessitatibus, sed periculis